I want to tell you something that took me decades to understand, something that cost me friendships, opportunities, peace of mind, and years of unnecessary suffering. Something so simple that when I finally grasped it, I couldn't believe how much energy I had wasted fighting against it. Here it is. Most of what disturbs you doesn't deserve your reaction. Most of what angers you isn't worth your words. Most of what provokes you is designed to steal your power. And the moment you learn to be calm, stay silent, and let nothing disturb you, everything changes. Your life transforms. Your relationships improve. Your mind clears. Your future opens up. But getting there requires you to unlearn almost everything you were taught about strength, about standing up for yourself, about making your voice heard, because real strength isn't loud. Real power doesn't need to prove itself. And real wisdom knows when silence is the most devastating response you can give. I spent years reacting to everything. Someone said something I didn't like, I had to respond. Someone disrespected me, I had to defend myself. Someone misunderstood me, I had to explain. I thought that's what strong people did. I thought that's how you earned respect. I thought that's how you protected your dignity. I was wrong. All I was doing was giving away my power to anyone who knew how to push my buttons. I was letting other people control my emotions, my energy, my peace. I was dancing like a puppet every time someone pulled a string. And the worst part is, I didn't even realize it. I thought I was being authentic. I thought I was being real. I thought I was refusing to be a pushover. But I was just being reactive. I was just being controlled. I was just being exactly what they wanted me to be. The turning point came when I noticed something about the people I truly respected. The ones who had genuine power, genuine influence, genuine peace. They didn't react to everything. They didn't defend themselves against every criticism. They didn't explain themselves to every person who misunderstood them. They moved through life with this quiet confidence, this unshakable calm, this ability to let things roll off them like water off a duck's back. And I realized that's not weakness. That's mastery. That's the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself. That's the kind of power that doesn't need validation from anyone. So I started practicing. I started catching myself before I reacted. I started asking myself a simple question every time something bothered me. Will this matter in a year? Will this matter in a month? Will this matter in a week? And most of the time, the answer was no. Most of the time, what felt so urgent, so important, so necessary to address in that moment was completely insignificant in the bigger picture. Those are the time I was about to waste my energy on something that would be forgotten by tomorrow. And once I saw that pattern, I couldn't unsee it. I started to understand that peace isn't something you find. Peace is something you protect. And you protect it by being very selective about what you allow to disturb it. Let me be clear about something. Being calm doesn't mean you don't care. Staying silent doesn't mean you have nothing to say. Letting nothing disturb you doesn't mean you're indifferent to what happens around you. It means you've developed the emotional maturity to distinguish between what deserves your energy and what doesn't. It means you've learned that not every battle is worth fighting, not every insult is worth addressing, not every opinion is worth considering, not every opinion is worth considering. It means you've realized that your peace of mind is too valuable to trade for the temporary satisfaction of proving someone wrong or putting someone in their place. I used to think that if I didn't defend myself, people would think I was weak. If I didn't speak up, people would take advantage of me. If I didn't react, people would disrespect me. But I learned the opposite is true. When you stop defending yourself against every petty criticism, people realize their words have no power over you. When you stop speaking up every time someone says something you disagree with, people start to understand that you're secure enough in your beliefs that you don't need everyone to agree with you. When you stop reacting to every provocation, people recognize that you're operating on a different level, that you're not playing the same games anymore, that you've evolved beyond the need for their validation. There's a specific kind of power that comes with silence, A power that most people never discover because they're too busy talking, too busy explaining, too busy defending, too busy reacting. When someone attacks you and you don't respond, they don't know what to do with that. They expected a fight. They wanted a reaction. They were prepared for you to get emotional, to get defensive, to give them ammunition for the next round. But when you give them nothing, when you simply observe them with calm detachment, when you refuse to engage in their drama, something shifts. Suddenly, they're the ones who look foolish. Suddenly, they're the ones wasting energy. Suddenly, they're the ones who seem small and petty, while you seem measured and mature. I remember a situation years ago where someone was spreading lies about me, complete fabrications designed to damage my reputation. The old me would have immediately jumped into action, defending myself, setting the record straight, making sure everyone knew the truth. But I had learned by then that sometimes the truth doesn't need a defense attorney. Sometimes the truth just needs time. So I said nothing. I did nothing. I let the lies exist without giving them any energy. And you know what happened? Within weeks, the person spreading them lost all credibility because their stories kept changing, kept getting more exaggerated, kept revealing themselves as fiction. Meanwhile, I went about my life, focused on my work, treating people well, being consistent, and people noticed. They noticed that I wasn't scrambling to defend myself. They noticed that I wasn't emotional or desperate. They noticed that I had the confidence to let my character speak for itself. And that silence, that refusal to engage, that calm in the face of attack, said more about my integrity than any defense I could have mounted. This is something young people struggle to understand. When you're young, you think you have to fight every battle. You think you have to correct every misconception. You think you have to make sure everyone knows your side of the story. But as you get older, as you gain experience, as you see the same patterns play out over and over, you realize that most battles aren't worth the casualties. Most misconceptions correct themselves without your intervention. Most stories don't need your input because the people who matter already know who you are, and the people who don't matter won't believe you anyway. There's something liberating about reaching the point where you genuinely don't need people to understand you, where you're so secure in who you are that other people's interpretations of your actions, your words, your intentions simply don't disturb your peace. I'm not talking about arrogance or not caring what anyone thinks. I'm talking about the deep inner knowing that comes from having done the work on yourself, from having examined your own character, from having aligned your actions with your values. When you know who you are, really know it at your core, other people's opinions become just noise. Interesting sometimes, worth considering occasionally, but ultimately just noise that you can choose to tune out. The people who master this art of calm, this discipline of silence, this immunity to disturbance, they share certain characteristics. They don't seek attention, but they command respect. They don't need to be the loudest voice in the room, but when they speak, people listen. They don't react to every slight, but when they do respond, it's measured, it's precise, it's devastating in its clarity. These are the people who understand that power is conserved, not displayed. That strength is stored, not spent on trivial conflicts. That wisdom whispers while foolishness shouts. I've noticed that the less I react, the more I notice. When you're not busy formulating your response, you can actually observe what's happening. You can see the dynamics at play. You can understand the motivations behind people's actions. You can recognize patterns you would have missed if you were emotionally engaged. This is one of the unexpected benefits of staying calm. You become more perceptive. You see things others miss because they're too caught up in their emotions, too busy reacting, too invested in their egos need to be right or validated or respected. Think about it. When you're angry, what do you see? You see the thing that angered you. When you're defensive, what do you notice? You notice the attack. When you're hurt, what do you focus on? You focus on your pain. Your emotional state narrows your perception, limits your awareness, traps you in a tunnel vision where all you can see is the thing that disturbed you. But when you're calm, when you refuse to let anything disturb your inner peace, suddenly you have access to a much wider perspective. You can see the bigger picture. You can understand the context. You can recognize that what seemed like a personal attack might just be someone else's pain expressing itself. What felt like disrespect might just be ignorance. What appeared to be malice might just be misunderstanding. This doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior or tolerate mistreatment. It means you respond from a place of clarity rather than emotion. It means you make decisions based on wisdom rather than impulse. It means you choose your battles based on what serves your long-term interests rather than what satisfies your short-term ego. And that's a completely different way of moving through the world. I'll tell you what changed for me when I adopted this approach. My relationships improved dramatically, not because I became a pushover, but because I stopped creating unnecessary conflict. I stopped taking things personally. I stopped assuming the worst about people's intentions. I started giving people space to be flawed, to make mistakes, to have bad days, without immediately writing them off or getting offended. And when I did need to address something, when something genuinely crossed the line, my words carried more weight because people knew I didn't speak out of petty emotion. They knew that if I was saying something, it mattered. My work improved because I stopped wasting energy on office politics, on who said what, on who got credit for what, on all those little dramas that consume so much mental bandwidth in most workplaces. I focused on doing excellent work. I focused on building genuine skills. I focused on creating value. And while others were busy gossiping, competing, positioning themselves, I was quietly building something real. And eventually that spoke louder than any self-promotion could have. My health improved because chronic stress is a killer. And most stress comes from reacting to things that don't deserve your reaction. When you stop letting every little thing disturb you, your nervous system settles, your cortisol levels drop, your sleep improves, your digestion improves, your immune system strengthens. Your body literally functions better when your mind is calm. This isn't mystical thinking. This is basic physiology. Your body is designed to handle acute stress, short bursts of fight or flight when you face genuine danger. But it's not designed to handle chronic stress, that constant low-level activation that comes from treating every inconvenience, every disappointment, every criticism as a crisis. When you master the art of staying calm, you give your body the gift of operating the way it's meant to operate. But perhaps the biggest change was in how I felt about myself. There's a deep satisfaction that comes from self-control, from knowing that you're not at the mercy of your emotions, from understanding that you have the power to choose your response to any situation. It's different from the satisfaction of winning an argument or proving someone wrong or getting the last word. Those satisfactions are shallow and temporary. The satisfaction of self-mastery is deep and lasting. It's the satisfaction of knowing you're becoming the person you want to be, not just reacting like a programmed robot to every stimulus in your environment. Let me address something that confuses people about this philosophy. They think staying calm means being passive. They think silence means agreement. They think letting nothing disturb you means accepting everything. That's not what I'm saying at all. There's a massive difference between being calm and being passive. Calm people take action. They just don't take action from a place of emotional reactivity. They assess situations. They consider consequences. They choose strategic responses. Passive people avoid action out of fear or apathy. Calm people delay reaction to choose the most effective action. There's a difference between silence and agreement. Sometimes silence is the most powerful form of disagreement. When someone says something ridiculous and you don't even dignify it with a response, that's not agreement, that's dismissal. That's a statement that their comment wasn't even worth engaging with. That's you maintaining your standards about what deserves your attention. Agreement would be nodding along, validating their perspective, supporting their position. Silence can be a brick wall that their words crash against and fall away from. And there's definitely a difference between letting nothing disturb you and accepting everything. I'm not talking about accepting injustice or tolerating abuse or allowing people to treat you poorly without consequence. I'm talking about maintaining your inner peace while you address whatever needs to be addressed. I'm talking about responding to problems from a place of centered strength rather than scattered emotion. The person who can stay calm while confronting a difficult situation is far more effective than the person who's emotionally dysregulated, saying things they'll regret, making decisions they'll reverse, burning bridges they'll wish they hadn't burned. Think about the people who have real power in this world. I'm not talking about celebrities or social media influencers. I'm talking about people who make significant decisions, who influence outcomes, who shape situations. They don't do it by being the most emotional person in the room. They don't do it by reacting to every provocation. They do it by staying calm under pressure, by thinking clearly when others are panicking, by maintaining their composure when everyone else is losing theirs. That's not coincidence. That's cause and effect. Their calmness is part of why they have power. Their refusal to be disturbed is part of what makes them effective. I've learned that most disturbances are tests, not in some cosmic sense, but in a very practical sense. People test you to see what you're made of. Situations test you to reveal your character. Life tests you to show you where you still have work to do. And the only way to pass these tests is to refuse to be disturbed by them. When someone tries to provoke you and you stay calm, you pass the test. When circumstances try to overwhelm you and you maintain your composure, you pass the test. When your own emotions try to hijack your decision making and you observe them without being controlled by them, you pass the test. And here's what's interesting. When you consistently pass these tests, fewer tests come your way. Not because life gets easier, but because you've demonstrated that you're not easily disturbed, so people stop trying to disturb you. You've shown that you don't engage in drama, so drama stops seeking you out. You've proven that you operate from principles rather than emotions, so situations that would have been chaotic with someone else resolve themselves smoothly with you. It's like you create a force field of calm around yourself that repels the kind of chaos that used to be normal in your life. But this doesn't happen overnight. This is a practice, a discipline, a skill you develop over time. You will fail at it repeatedly before you master it. You will react when you meant to stay calm. You will speak when you meant to stay silent. You will let things disturb you that you wish you could have ignored. That's part of the process. The key is to learn from each instance. When you react poorly, don't beat yourself up about it. Just observe it. Notice what triggered you. Notice what you felt. Notice what you said or did. Notice the consequences. And then ask yourself, how could I handle this better next time? Out of keeping a mental inventory of my triggers, the things that could reliably make me lose my composure. For some people, it's criticism. For others, it's feeling disrespected. For others, it's being misunderstood. For others, it's seeing injustice. Everyone has their specific triggers, the buttons that, when pushed, bypass their rational mind and activate their emotional reactivity. Once I identified my triggers, I could prepare for them for whatever period of time. But I always be better prepared. But once I had been prepared, I was ready. That updated the way that I prepared for them. I could practice my response ahead of time. I could develop strategies for staying calm when those buttons got pushed. And over time, those buttons became less sensitive. They still existed, but they required more force to activate. Eventually, some of them stopped working altogether. One of my biggest triggers used to be feeling misunderstood. If I said something and someone interpreted it differently than I intended, I would immediately jump in to clarify, to explain, to make sure they understood what I really meant. I couldn't stand the idea of someone having a wrong impression of my thoughts or intentions. But this made me exhausting to talk to. Every conversation became a negotiation about meaning. I couldn't let anything go. I couldn't accept that sometimes people will misunderstand you, and that's okay. I couldn't relax into the reality that your words belong to others once you speak them, and they're going to interpret them through their own filters, their own experiences, their own biases, and there's nothing you can do about that. Learning to let people be wrong about me was incredibly freeing. I stopped spending so much energy on correction and clarification. I stopped trying to control everyone's perception of me. I accepted that some people will misunderstand me and there's nothing I can do about it, and more importantly, there's nothing I need to do about it. The people who matter will understand me or will ask for clarification if they don't. The people who don't matter can think whatever they want. Their misconceptions are their problem, not mine. Another trigger was feeling disrespected. If someone spoke to me in a tone I didn't like, or dismissed my opinion, or didn't acknowledge my contribution, or treated me as less than I believed I deserved, I would bristle. I would find a way to reassert my value, to remind them who they were dealing with, to put them in their place. But all this did was make me look insecure. Secure people don't need to demand respect. They don't need to react to every slight. They know their value and they don't need it validated by everyone they encounter. When I finally understood that, when I finally internalized it, I stopped caring so much about whether every person I interacted with treated me with the level of respect I thought I deserved. Here's what I learned about respect. You can't force it. You can demand it, but that's not real respect. That's fear or compliance. Real respect is earned through consistency, through character, through the accumulation of actions over time that demonstrate your integrity and competence. And the irony is, the less you need it, the more you get it. The more secure you are in yourself, the less you react to disrespect. The more respect comes your way. Because people recognize that you're not desperate for their validation. They recognize that you're operating from a place of genuine self-worth rather than fragile ego. I also used to be triggered by injustice. When I saw something unfair happening, I had to speak up, I had to do something, I had to make it right. And while there's nobility in that impulse, it also meant I was constantly agitated, constantly fighting, constantly exhausting myself, trying to fix everything wrong with the world. I had to learn to distinguish between the injustices I could meaningfully impact and the injustices I couldn't. I had to learn to pick my battles. I had to learn that you can care about something without making it your personal crusade. You can acknowledge something is wrong without feeling obligated to fix it yourself right now. You can maintain awareness of problems while also maintaining your peace. This doesn't mean you never take action against injustice. It means you take strategic action rather than reactive action. It means you choose the battles where you can actually make a difference rather than scattering your energy across every wrong you encounter. It means you sustain your capacity to create change by not burning yourself out on fights you can't win. The people who create lasting change in the world aren't the ones who react emotionally to every injustice. They're the ones who stay calm enough to develop effective strategies, who maintain their composure enough to build coalitions, who preserve their energy enough to sustain long-term efforts. Emotional reactivity might feel good in the moment, but it rarely creates lasting impact. As I practiced staying calm, as I developed the discipline of silence, as I learned to let fewer things disturb me, I noticed my decision-making improve dramatically. When you're emotionally activated, you make terrible decisions. You say things you don't mean. You make commitments you can't keep. You burn bridges you'll need to cross later. You prioritize short-term satisfaction over long-term benefit. But when you're calm, when you're not disturbed, you can think clearly. You can consider consequences. You can evaluate options. You can choose the path that serves your actual interests rather than your momentary emotions. I used to make decisions in the heat of the moment all the time. Someone would make me angry and I'd quit. Someone would disappoint me and I'd cut them off. Something would go wrong and I'd abandon the whole project. I left jobs I should have stayed in. I ended relationships I should have worked on. I gave up on goals I should have persisted with. All because I let my emotions drive my decisions. All because I couldn't stay calm long enough to think things through. All because I let temporary disturbances override my better judgment. Now I have a simple rule. If I'm emotionally activated, I don't make decisions. I wait. I sit with it. I let the emotional wave pass. I give myself time to return to baseline. And then from that place of calm, I consider what action, if any, is appropriate. Sometimes I realize that what felt like a crisis in the moment is actually not that big a deal. Sometimes I recognize that what seemed like an unforgivable offense was actually a misunderstanding or someone having a bad day. Sometimes I understand that what appeared to require immediate action actually requires no action at all. And even when I do need to take action, I take much better action from a place of calm than I ever could from a place of disturbance. This practice has saved me from countless mistakes. It saved relationships that I would have destroyed in a moment of anger. It saved me from career moves I would have regretted. It saved me from purchases I didn't need, from commitments I couldn't fulfill, from promises I couldn't keep. The person I was 10 years ago, reacting to everything, emotionally dysregulated, taking everything personally, that person made so many unnecessary problems for himself. The person I am now, practiced in calm, disciplined in silence, refusing to let most things disturb me, this person navigates life so much more smoothly. And it's not because my circumstances are easier. If anything, my circumstances are more complex now. More responsibility, more pressure, more potential problems. But I'm more capable of handling them because I've developed this capacity for calm. I've built this muscle of non-reactivity. I've trained myself to stay centered regardless of what's happening around me. And that capacity, that muscle, that training, it's more valuable than any external circumstance could be. Let me tell you about silence specifically, because this is something people really misunderstand. They think silence is weakness. They think if you don't speak up, you're letting people walk all over you. They think if you don't defend yourself, you're admitting guilt. They think if you don't engage with criticism, you're conceding the point. None of that is true. Silence is often the strongest possible response. It's the response of someone who doesn't need to prove anything. It's the response of someone who's secure enough to let accusations go unanswered. It's the response of someone who understands that explanations are for people who deserve them. And most people don't. I've watched people talk themselves into trouble so many times. They felt accused, so they defended themselves, but their defense included information that made them look worse. They felt misunderstood, so they explained themselves, but their explanation revealed things they should have kept private. They felt attacked, so they counterattacked, but their counterattack created enemies they didn't need to make. All of this could have been avoided with silence. All of this happened because they couldn't tolerate the discomfort of letting someone think something incorrect about them, even temporarily, even when that person's opinion didn't actually matter. There's a certain maturity that comes with understanding you don't owe everyone an explanation. You don't owe everyone access to your thoughts, your reasoning, your justifications. Some people have earned that access through relationship, through trust, through demonstrated wisdom. Most people haven't. Most people are just curious or nosy or looking for ammunition or trying to satisfy their own need to understand things that frankly aren't their business. And you're allowed to keep your business private. You're allowed to let their curiosity go unsatisfied. You're allowed to maintain boundaries around what you share and with whom. I used to be an over-explainer. Someone would ask me why I made a decision and I'd give them a dissertation. Someone would question my choice and I'd justify it with extensive reasoning. Someone would doubt me and I'd prove myself with evidence and arguments. I thought this was being transparent. I thought this was being open. I thought this was building trust. But what it actually was a subtle form of seeking approval. I was trying to get people to agree with my choices. I was trying to get validation that I made the right decision. I was outsourcing my confidence to their judgment. And that meant I was never truly secure in my own choices because I always needed external confirmation. Learning to simply say, that's what I decided, or that's what works for me, without further explanation was powerful. It forced me to be more certain of my choices before I made them, because I knew I wouldn't have the crutch of explaining them away later. It forced me to be more comfortable with people potentially disagreeing with my choices, because I wasn't going to argue them into agreement. It forced me to develop genuine self-trust rather than constantly seeking consensus. And it saved me enormous amounts of energy that I used to spend in endless explanations to people who weren't going to be convinced anyway. Here's a truth that took me too long to learn. Most people aren't listening to understand you. They're listening to respond. They're listening to find the flaw in your argument. They're listening to gather ammunition for their counterpoint. They're listening with their own agenda firmly in place, just waiting for you to finish speaking so they can say what they already decided to say before you even open your mouth. And once you realize this, you realize that most explanations are wasted breath. Most justifications fall on ears that aren't actually open to being persuaded. Most attempts to make people understand are attempts to change minds that have no intention of being changed. So why waste your words? Why spend your energy? Why disturb your peace by engaging in conversations that aren't actually conversations but just parallel monologues where nobody's really communicating? Better to save your words for the people who've demonstrated they're actually listening. Better to save your explanations for the people who've earned the right to hear them. Better to maintain your silence with everyone else and let them think whatever they're going to think, regardless of what you say.